My parents told me that as a woman, a car is just for getting around. But my brother? He deserves a Tesla to build his future. And guess who they expect to pay for it? I never thought I'd be the kind of person to cut ties with my own family. But after what happened, I don't see any other way. My name is Celeste Monroe, and I'm 33 years old. I've spent over a decade working my ass off, building a stable career, and creating a life that I could call my own. I never relied on anyone, not my parents, not my brother, because deep down, I always knew I couldn't. And last week, I finally achieved something that I was truly proud of. I bought my first car. It wasn't some flashy sports car, nor was it a luxury vehicle. It was a solid, reliable car that I paid for with my own hard-earned money, a testament to my years of effort and independence. I should have been celebrating. I should have been enjoying this moment. But my happiness lasted less than 24 hours, because as soon as my parents found out, they called me immediately. "Come home, Celeste. We need to talk. It's important." I thought maybe something serious had happened. Maybe they were in trouble. Maybe, for once, they actually needed my help for something reasonable. I was so wrong. What they had to say left me completely speechless. And now, as I write this on r/true off my chest, I realize that strangers on the internet might actually understand me better than my own family ever did. This is just the beginning of a story filled with betrayal, anger, and heartbreak. If you want to hear more true stories like this, make sure to follow Reddit True Vault. I should have known. The second I walked into my parents' house, something felt off. The air was heavy, like they had already decided something and were just waiting for me to show up and fall in line. They had called me the night before, telling me to come over because we need to talk, Celeste. It's important. I actually thought something serious had happened. Maybe they were struggling financially. Maybe someone was sick. Maybe, for once, they actually needed me for something that wasn't just another favor. I should have known better. I barely had time to sit down before my father dropped it like it was the most normal thing in the world. Jackson needed a car, not just any car, a Tesla. And somehow, since I had just bought my own car, a modest, affordable car that I worked my ass off to afford, it only made sense that I should pay for most of Jackson's, 80% to be exact. 80%. I swear, for a solid 10 seconds, I just stared at them in silence, waiting for the joke, waiting for them to laugh and say, "Gotcha." But no, they were dead serious. My parents, the same people who never paid a cent toward my education, never helped me with rent, never once supported me financially after I turned 18, had now decided that it was my responsibility to buy my unemployed 28-year-old brother a brand new luxury car. And what was their contribution? 20%. Like that was supposed to make it fair. Like they were doing me a favor by not making me cover the entire thing. I was so stunned I actually asked them to repeat themselves. Maybe I had misheard. Maybe this was all some horrible misunderstanding. But no, they fully expected me to take out a loan, pay monthly installments, and shoulder 80% of the cost. And when I asked why I had to do this, why Jackson, a grown man, couldn't just buy his own damn car like I did, my mother said something that made my blood run cold. "Celeste, you're a woman. A car is just a way for you to get from one place to another. But Jackson, he's a man. He needs a good car to build his future." That was it. That was all the justification they needed. I have spent my entire life working for every single thing I have. I moved out young. I put myself through school. I worked my ass off for years to get to where I am now. Meanwhile, Jackson has done absolutely nothing. He has never had a real job, never taken responsibility for himself, never done anything but sit around, waste time, and wait for someone else to fix his life. And yet, somehow, he deserved a Tesla because he was a man. And I, a woman, was expected to hand it to him because I had the audacity to be financially independent. I told them no. Flat out no. I could see the disbelief in their eyes. My mother immediately switched to guilt-tripping mode, saying things like, "After everything we've done for you, Celeste, you wouldn't even be where you are if it weren't for us." Oh, really? They had never given me a cent of support. I had worked myself to the bone for everything I had. But now, suddenly, they wanted credit for my success? My father, always the more calculated one, kept his voice even. "We're not asking you to buy the whole thing. Just most of it. You can afford it." Oh, well, since I can afford it, obviously, that makes it okay. It wasn't about whether or not I had the money. It was about the principle. I could have been a billionaire, and I still wouldn't have given Jackson a cent for that car. Because why should I? Why should I reward laziness? Why should I be punished for being responsible? But they didn't see it that way. They didn't see me as their daughter. They saw me as their ATM. At some point, I realized I wasn't going to change their minds. So I stood up, grabbed my keys, and told them I needed to think about it. I lied. I wasn't going to think about it. I wasn't going to entertain the thought for even a second. I walked out of that house and got into my car, the car that I paid for with my own damn money, and drove home in silence. I should have felt victorious for standing my ground. But I didn't. I just felt empty because I realized something that night. It wasn't about the car. It wasn't even about Jackson. It was about the fact that no matter what I did, no matter how hard I worked, I would never be anything more than a resource to them. And the worst part? This wasn't even the most shocking thing they would do to me. Driving home that night, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly they ached, a thought crept into my mind that I couldn't shake. Why was I even surprised? Why did I still expect anything different from them? Why did I still hold on to this stupid, naive hope that maybe, just maybe, if I worked hard enough, if I proved myself enough, they would finally see me, finally treat me like I mattered? They never would, because this wasn't new. This had been my entire life. I don't know when exactly I realized that in my family, I was never going to be the priority. Maybe I always knew, on some level. But as a child, you don't think like that. You don't wake up one day and say, "Oh, I see. My parents don't love me the same way they love my brother." No, it happened slowly. Little moments, little cracks in the foundation, until one day, you realize the whole damn thing was never built for you to stand on in the first place. I was 5 the first time I remember feeling like something wasn't fair. At 5 years old, I was already expected to help around the house, washing dishes, folding laundry, picking up after everyone, like some tiny maid in training. It didn't matter that I was just a kid myself. If I dared to complain, my mother would just wave me off with a tired sigh. "You're a girl, Celeste. This is what girls do." Jackson, of course, never had to lift a finger. He could make a mess and just walk away, knowing that someone, me, would always be there to clean up after him. By the time I was 8, my responsibilities had doubled, because now I wasn't just the little housekeeper. I was also Jackson's second mother. It was my job to feed him, get him dressed, help him with his homework, play with him when he was bored, and God forbid he cried or threw a tantrum, because then I was the one getting in trouble for not keeping him happy. "You're his big sister, Celeste. You need to take care of him." They said it like it was my life's mission, like I had been born for the sole purpose of making Jackson's life easier. I didn't even question it. That's the thing about growing up in a family like mine. You don't know anything else. You don't realize that other kids, other daughters, don't live like this. You just accept it. When I was 12, I asked my parents if I could take art classes. I had always loved drawing. It was the one thing that felt like mine. The one thing that made me feel like I was more than just a caretaker, a helper, a background character in my own life. But when I brought it up, my mother just laughed. "Art classes? What for? Kongai Kong kan tai nong. Lojup jia din truakta." Girls don't need talent. Girls need to be useful. I watched as Jackson got piano lessons, soccer practice, summer camps, all paid for without a second thought. But me? No. There was no point in investing in me, because, in their eyes, I had no future worth investing in. I kept my head down. I did what I was told. I thought, okay, maybe if I work hard, if I prove myself, they'll see my value. And at 16, I did just that. I worked my ass off in school. I stayed up late studying. I took extra courses. I sacrificed sleep and social life. And in the end, I earned a full-ride scholarship to a top university. I was so proud. I walked into the house, beaming, holding the acceptance letter like it was my golden ticket. "Mom, Dad, I got in, and they're covering everything. I won't have to take out loans." My father barely looked up from the newspaper. "That's nice, Celeste. But why are you so excited? In the end, you'll just get married and have kids. It's not like a degree really matters for you." I swear, something inside me cracked that day. I had worked so damn hard. I had pushed myself to prove I was worth something, and all they saw was a future housewife. A month later, Jackson barely scraped by in high school. His grades were mediocre at best, and my parents? They threw him a damn party. They invited family, decorated the house, bought a massive cake, and gave him an expensive watch because he worked so hard. I remember standing in the corner, watching him bask in their praise, and wondering if they had ever, in my entire life, looked at me the way they were looking at him. They never had. They never would. It took me a long time to let go of the hope that one day they'd be proud of me. For years, I kept trying, kept giving, kept hoping that if I just achieved enough, provided enough, sacrificed enough, then maybe they'd finally see me. But after tonight, after sitting at that kitchen table and listening to them tell me that my only purpose in life was to fund my brother's future, I finally understood. I was never going to be enough for them, because they had never wanted a daughter. They had wanted a servant. They had wanted a bank, and I had been giving them exactly what they wanted for far too long. But not anymore. Not anymore. I had barely been home for 10 minutes when my phone rang. I almost didn't pick up. I was emotionally drained, my mind still reeling from the conversation with my parents. The last thing I wanted was to hear another voice telling me how selfish I was for not handing over my hard-earned money to a grown man who refused to get a job. But then I saw the caller ID. Jackson. A part of me already knew what was coming, but I still answered. Maybe some small, delusional part of me thought he was calling to apologize. I should have known better. The second I picked up, his voice exploded through the speaker. Furious, indignant, like I had personally committed some grave injustice against him. Like I had stolen from him, instead of simply refusing to give. He was livid. How could I be so selfish? How could I, his own sister, have the audacity to buy myself a car, but refuse to help him get one? I had a job. I made money. I could afford it. And yet, I had looked him in the face and said no. I gripped my phone, my knuckles white, as he continued. The sheer entitlement in his voice was staggering. He acted as if this was a given, as if I had a moral obligation to buy him a Tesla just because I was financially stable. He wasn't just upset, he was offended. Personally offended. Like my refusal to buy him a luxury car wasn't just unfair, but cruel. And then came the part that really got me. I was greedy. I was selfish. I was a terrible sister who didn't care about her family. I had money, but I wanted to hoard it instead of helping out, as if I hadn't been helping out my entire goddamn life. I felt something inside me snap. This wasn't just a temper tantrum. This was who Jackson was. This was who he had always been. And I had been too blind, too desperate to believe he was anything more to see it. I tried to explain, to make him understand that it wasn't about the money. It was about the principle. But he wasn't listening. He was never listening. To him, I wasn't a person with my own life, my own goals, my own financial responsibilities. I was just the ATM that had suddenly declined his transaction. The worst part was, I could hear the disgust in his voice. The sheer contempt. He genuinely believed that I thought I was better than him. That because I had moved out, because I had a career, because I had finally started saying no after years of saying yes, I must have thought I was above them all. And that was when it hit me. This wasn't just about the car. Jackson wasn't just angry that I wouldn't buy him a Tesla. He was angry that I had escaped. He was angry that I had broken free from the cycle. That I was no longer the little girl who could be bullied into obedience. That I was no longer the sister who would clean up his messes and fix his problems and let him take without consequences. And he hated me for it. I felt something inside me shift. A part of me that had been clinging to the illusion that he was still my brother. That maybe, deep down, he loved me. That maybe, one day, he would see me as more than just a resource. I hung up. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just hung up. And then I sat there, staring at my phone, completely and utterly hollow. Because at that moment, I realized something I should have understood a long time ago. Jackson had never seen me as his sister. He had only ever seen me as his wallet. And now that I had finally closed the bank, he had no use for me. I put my phone down, walked over to my couch, and I sat there, staring at the wall, as the weight of everything came crashing down. I had no one. My parents didn't love me. My brother didn't love me. Not for who I was, at least. They only loved what I could provide. And now that I had nothing left to give, I was worthless to them. For the first time in my life, I let myself accept that truth. And it broke me, completely. I thought I had reached my limit. After everything, after their outrageous demand, after Jackson's entitled meltdown, I thought there was nothing left they could do to hurt me. I was wrong, because a few days later, I got a call from my bank. It started normally enough. The woman on the other end of the line had the usual polite, customer service tone, informing me that my auto loan had been approved. I remember frowning, confused. Auto loan? What auto loan? Then she said the words that made my entire body go numb. The Tesla Model Y. She kept talking, something about the first payment being due next month, but I had already stopped listening. I hadn't applied for a loan that I hadn't agreed to anything that I hadn't signed a single goddamn thing. And yet, here I was, saddled with debt for a car I didn't buy, for a car I had explicitly refused to pay for a car my parents stole from me before I even knew it existed. I don't even remember how I got home. One moment, I was holding my phone in my apartment, still trying to process what had just happened. The next, I was standing in my parents' living room, hands shaking so badly I could barely keep hold of my car keys. I didn't ask. I didn't even try to ease into the conversation. I already knew, and they did too. My mother didn't even look guilty. She just blinked at me, like I was overreacting, and said that of course they had taken out the loan in my name. It made perfect sense, didn't it? I had a stable job. The bank would approve it much faster under my name. Like this was just some casual inconvenience for me. Like they had done me a favor by taking the burden of applying off my hands. Like I was being unreasonable for reacting the way I was. I remember staring at her, feeling this awful, sinking realization settle in my gut. They didn't even try to hide it. They had stolen from me, forged my signature, put me in thousands of dollars of debt, and they weren't even sorry. My father was the same. Annoyed, exasperated, acting like I was the one making things difficult. He didn't see why I was so upset. The payments weren't that bad. It's not like I couldn't afford it. And anyway, I would have helped eventually, so they just took care of it ahead of time. Took care of it, like I was a child who had to be managed. Like I was too selfish to do the right thing, so they had to do it for me. Like my consent had never even mattered. Because to them, it never did. I don't know what I was expecting in that moment. Maybe guilt. Maybe regret. Maybe, at the very least, an apology. But there was nothing. Just annoyance. Just frustration that I was making this into a bigger deal than it needed to be. I don't think I even yelled. I just stood there, numb, as the truth hit me all at once. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. They knew exactly what they were doing, and they didn't think it was wrong. Then came the worst part. The moment they realized I wasn't just going to accept it, their irritation turned into pure rage. Their mild annoyance became disgust. They didn't see me as their daughter anymore. They saw me as defective, a failure, because I wasn't falling in line, because I was refusing to be used, and they hated me for it. That's when the insults started. How selfish I was. How ungrateful. How I had money but wouldn't even help my own family. How I thought I was better than them just because I had moved out, because I had a good job. How I had turned my back on them. They didn't care about the theft. They only cared that I caught them, that I confronted them, that I dared to be angry that they stole from me. Not once did they apologize. Not once did they show a sliver of remorse. Because in their minds, they hadn't done anything wrong. I left. I don't even remember walking to my car. I don't remember the drive home. All I remember is sitting in my apartment, staring at the loan documents I had requested from the bank, my name scrawled across the bottom. Except it wasn't my handwriting. My own parents had forged my signature. And now, I was on the hook for a car I never wanted, for a brother who had just called me selfish for not buying him one. I should have felt angry. I should have been furious. But all I felt was exhausted. Because this wasn't just about the loan. This was about 10 years of sending them money, and it still not being enough. This was about a lifetime of being treated like my only worth was what I could provide. And the worst part? Even after all of this, some small, broken part of me still wanted them to love me. But they never would. Top of form, bottom of form. I don't know how long I sat there. Time didn't feel real anymore. The apartment was silent, except for the sound of my own breathing. Shallow, uneven, like I was trying to hold myself together with nothing but air. I had nothing left. No fight. No words. Just this crushing, unbearable weight on my chest. I had spent my entire life giving, sacrificing, trying to be enough. And now, when I finally had nothing left to give, my own family discarded me like I was worthless. I broke. The tears came fast and hard, racking my entire body like something inside me had finally shattered. Because the truth was, it wasn't just about the money. It was never just about the money. It was about knowing that I had never been loved for who I was. It was about realizing that, to them, I had only ever been a bank account with a pulse, and I didn't know how to exist with that truth. I had always held on to some hope, some desperate, pathetic hope that if I just tried hard enough, they would see me, but they never had, and they never would. I don't know how long I cried. At some point, I must have grabbed my phone without thinking, because before I knew it, I was staring at my screen, my vision blurred from tears. There was only one name I could call, Lily, the only person who had ever really seen me. The phone rang once, twice, then her voice, Celeste, and just like that, I broke all over again. I must have been sobbing too hard to speak because her tone immediately shifted, from confusion to concern to something bordering on panic. What happened? I tried to answer, but all that came out was a broken, gasping breath. Celeste, where are you? Are you safe? I nodded before realizing she couldn't see me. I'm home. I finally managed to choke out. I could hear rustling on the other end, like she was already reaching for her keys. I'm coming over. Lily showed up 20 minutes later, and the second I opened the door, she pulled me into a hug so tight I thought I might actually break apart in her arms. I didn't even realize how badly I needed it until that moment. For the first time all night, I felt like someone actually cared. She didn't ask questions right away. She didn't push. She just sat with me, rubbing slow, calming circles on my back as I tried to piece myself back together. And then, finally, when the worst of the storm had passed, I told her everything. The bank call, the forged documents, the debt I never agreed to, how my parents stole from me, how they didn't even care, how they blamed me, like I was the one who had betrayed them. And when I was done, when there was nothing left to say, Lily was silent for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm. Steady. Celeste, it's time to let them go. I swallowed hard. You know that, right? I opened my mouth. Closed it, because I did know. I had known for a long time. I had just been too afraid to admit it. They're not your family, she said softly. Not really. They're just people who have been using you for years. And there it was. The truth I had spent my entire life running from. I felt something deep in my chest, something raw and painful, but also freeing. Because Lily was right. I had spent years trying to earn love that was never real. But it wasn't my job to make them love me. It wasn't my fault that they didn't. I didn't know them anything anymore. And I wasn't going to let them ruin me. Not anymore. The next morning, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to my bank. I told them my identity had been stolen, that my signature had been forged, and that I was filing a dispute against the loan. They connected me with their fraud department and said I'd need legal representation. That led to the second call. Douglas Bennett, a lawyer Lily had recommended, one of the best in financial fraud cases. I explained everything, every last detail. And when I was done, he was quiet for a moment before he finally said, "This isn't just a civil case, Celeste. What your parents did, this is a crime. Fraud, identity theft, forgery. They had broken the law. And for the first time, I wasn't going to protect them from the consequences. I don't know what I expected to feel when I finally made the decision. Anger? Relief? Maybe a little of both. But mostly, I just felt light. Like I was finally stepping out of the wreckage of a burning house I had spent my entire life trying to fix. I wasn't going to fight for their approval anymore. I wasn't going to waste one more second trying to be enough for people who would never see me as anything more than a source of money. I was done. And for the first time in my life, I was fighting for myself. I thought I would feel guilty. After everything. After standing my ground. After cutting them off. After filing the lawsuit. I thought some part of me would break down and start doubting myself. But it never happened. I waited for the regret, for the guilt, for that nagging voice in the back of my mind telling me that I had made a mistake. But all I felt was relief. The case didn't take long. The evidence was overwhelming. The forged documents, the fraudulent loan, the financial records. It was all there, clear as day. My lawyer, Douglas, made sure I was protected. The bank canceled the loan, my credit was restored, and legally, I was in the clear. My parents? Not so much. They tried to plead ignorance at first, acting like it was all some misunderstanding, but the law didn't see it that way. Fraud is fraud. They were forced to deal with the consequences. At some point, they started reaching out. Calls, messages, voicemails. Some of them desperate, some of them angry. They tried everything, begging, guilt-tripping, demanding, but I never answered, because they weren't calling to apologize. They were calling because they wanted something from me. And for the first time in my life, I had nothing left to give. Jackson didn't take it well either. Without me there to clean up his mess, he finally had to face reality. No Tesla, no endless stream of money, no big sister to bail him out. He sent texts. Angry, hateful, venomous texts. Blaming me for everything. He said I had ruined his life. That I was cruel, heartless, a terrible sister. That he deserved better. I read them once, then deleted them all, and I never responded. It's strange. For so long, I thought cutting them off would be the hardest thing I'd ever do. But once I finally did it, I realized it wasn't hard at all. Without them, I could finally breathe. For the first time, my life was mine. No more guilt, and no more pressure, and no more waking up every day feeling like I had to earn love that was never real. Now, I do things for me. I go out with Lily more. We're planning a long trip, something just for fun, something without stress. We're going to see places I never thought I'd have time for, spend money on experiences instead of obligations. I'm learning to put myself first, to invest in myself, not in people who would only drain me dry. And it feels so goddamn good. I don't know what happened to them after that. And honestly, I don't care. For the first time in my life, they're not my problem anymore. I spent my entire youth trying to be good enough for them, trying to earn love that was never real, trying to prove that I was worth more than what I could provide. But in their eyes, I was never a daughter. I was a resource, a machine that existed to serve, to sacrifice, to keep giving until there was nothing left. And when I finally said no, when I finally stood up for myself, they discarded me like I had never mattered at all. I don't know if what I did was right. Maybe some people will say I should have forgiven them, that I should have tried harder to fix things. But the truth is, if I hadn't walked away, they would have drained me until there was nothing left. When I first wrote on /true off my chest, all I wanted was to vent, to find even the smallest shred of understanding from strangers on the internet. But now, I realize this story is bigger than just me. I'm not the only one who has gone through this. So if you're reading this, and you see yourself in my story, if you have spent years trying to please people who will never love you the way you deserve, let me be the person to tell you what I wish someone had told me years ago. You don't owe anyone your peace. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. And most importantly, you are allowed to walk away. It doesn't make you cruel. It doesn't make you heartless. It makes you free. This is a real story, written by Celeste Monroe and shared on /true off my chest. What do you think? What would you do if you were in Celeste's position? Do you think she was too cold? Or did she finally do what needed to be done? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to hear more real-life stories like this one, don't forget to follow Reddit True Vault.